Ladies and gentlemen, in this episode, you are going to hear opinions. And while the podcast is endorsed by Uriah Heep, the opinions of the host and various guests do not necessarily represent the opinions of the band or any of the members past or present. With that being said, let's celebrate the music of Uriah Heep. Welcome to Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I'll be covering every studio song the band has recorded and every bonus track that I can find. Each week we'll go over a new song from the beginning to where they are currently, and as they keep adding albums, I'll keep adding shows. Let the deep dive party begin.
In the magic garden, some were singing, some were dancing.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I have a great song for you, but not only do I have a great song, I have a great co-host with me. Now, this gentleman is on a show called In the Lap of the Pods, which is a podcast all about the fantastic band Queen, which I've pretty much learned everything I know about from them. And we have with us today Dave Moody. Dave, how are you?
I am fantastic, Scott. Absolutely fantastic. Glad to be here.
Well, we're happy. I say we, it's me. I'm happy to have you here. And so is everyone listening, whether they are or not. So what made you guys decide to do a Queen podcast? So it's you and Joe and Paul, and you guys do the show together, which is great because you feed off each other so well. What made you guys start it?
I think it was fairly obvious that it would be Queen. I think because it was the first band that we all, as very young kids, got into first. So it was our first serious band. Mm-hmm. And we all get, I'm best friends with Joe, and I met Joe and he was already like 4 years into being a Queen fan, even though he was still a very young kid, as like myself. And obviously Paul's my older brother, so he was playing Queen music, and what's this? And eventually I get hooked on that as well. So,
sure.
And I think because of Queen, I think because of the diversity in their music, you just knew there was going to be lots of interesting things to talk about, to pull apart, because you've got, 1 minute you've got something like, I don't know, just pick a soft song like maybe on Offshoot Heart Attack, Dear Friends, and then next minute you've got Stone Cold Crazy, so this really subtle soft piano thing, and then you're into like, proto thrash, metal, in 1974. So there's all these different kind of places you can go, and and they are a common favourite band as well. So it just seemed like, and oddly enough, there was no one at that point doing a Queen podcast. There had been an official one that had happened, and it just kind of ran its course, years before. But there wasn't a fan one that existed, and we just found that so bizarre. One of the biggest bands of all time, but no one's doing a podcast.
Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing about Uriah Heep, but when I thought about doing it, and I thought, well, let me do a search because there's got to be at least one, if not two or three. Yeah. There was nothing, and I was really surprised. A lot of bands still don't have podcasts that I'm kind of surprised at, but I think over time they'll eventually pop up. But I think Queen is just one of those bands that is so unique. They didn't really follow a formula of this is how you write music, this is how you put out an album. They just kind of came in and said, here's who we are and what we're going to do. And they really just made their own mark.
Absolutely. I mean, when they started off, they were, I would say they were certainly the first two albums, you'd be forgiven for saying they were a heavy metal band, the first two albums, because it was all big slabby riffs most of the time. There was those kind of nuances of a bit more prog elements and stuff, and those, March of the Black Queen, things like that. But it always came back to really, heavy riffing a lot of the time. And by the third album, things had started to change. Killer Queen was on that album, and you could see obviously a shift starting to happen. But the thing is, you get with some bands that start to progress, but maybe they're chasing sales. I didn't feel like that was, it seemed like a natural progression with Queen. They were just progressing along into different things, and the songwriting was getting it was getting a bit more accessible, but they were doing it in such a good way that it didn't seem to matter. But I do feel they are unique, but just because of the diversity in their music, even if Bohemian Rhapsody hadn't happened, that band probably would have stopped at that fourth album, and they probably couldn't have got on it because they were in so much debt. So even the fact that the Night at the Opera album is such a diverse album, and you've got that absolute monster of a song in Bohemian Rhapsody, had that not existed, I would question whether Queen would have got past that fourth album, and I think most fans think that way. So it's so bizarre to think that all that other music wouldn't have happened after that, because they went on to other things, delving into other styles, So yeah. I'm waffling on here, Scott. Sorry.
Oh no, that's great. But that's really interesting because it just made me think about, actually really giving credit to the record company who stuck with them, or maybe the record companies. I'm not sure, because for them to allow them to go into debt over 3 albums, normally they would drop you after the first one, maybe the second one if they thought it had potential. So we have to give credit to them and the producers obviously for not saying, guys, we need commercial hits, we need stuff we could play. And forcing them into a direction that they wouldn't have arrived where they did.
Yeah, indeed. And I think the main reason for the debt was actually the management. The management was stealing money from them, basically. So that's why they were so massively in debt. And so they switched manager to John Reid, who was Elton John's manager. So before A Night at the Opera came out, the fourth album, they'd switched to John Reid, and John Reid sorted out all the finances and said, go and make the best album that you can possibly make. So they were given that freedom to go and do that. But Bohemian Rhapsody hadn't been a single, if the record company had succeeded in resisting that would, no one would have heard that as being a single. And it's debatable whether that album would have sold as much as it did or been this iconic album, because it would have just been an album track. So it's interesting how history, there must be moments in Heap's, history where there's almost like if this went just that way, this might have happened, that might have happened, and I find that fascinating about bands,
Oh, sure.
Overall, so.
And now Bohemian Rhapsody has gone on to be one of the songs. In fact, I just saw somebody had posted a meme on Facebook the other day that said it had a picture of them in the the diamond shape with the heads from the video, and it said, "If you don't know what this song is, we can't be friends." I thought, that really is such a defining song for so many people, and I think for generations to come, that song will be part of culture.
Indeed, it is. I mean, it's overplayed. I mean, there's no doubt it is overplayed. It's you probably hear it every week somewhere. And it is an overplayed song. And at times, I think because of that, you forget how genius the song is. So it almost kind of, it's Bohemian Rhapsody again, and it just washes over you. It goes into the background. But obviously, doing the podcast and thinking about the song and analysing it, again, the way you maybe did when you first heard it the first couple of times, was great because it is an excellent song. So yeah, absolutely.
After you guys did that, when I did the song Easy Living, when I did my episode for Easy Living, and I finished it, and I'm running all the filters and stuff to clean up the audio, and I'm thinking, that's over. Like, I finished that song. Yeah. And then I thought, what right do I have to be talking about such a classic, iconic song? Like, who am I to be going over it? And then I thought, well, I'm a fan, I'm a musician, I'm an audio engineer. Of course, anybody has the right to talk about a song. But did you guys feel when you covered that, after you were done, did you kind of go, wow, we've covered that? That was like the most epic thing that this band is known for, and that's done now. That's off of our plate.
I'll be honest, probably not. I don't know if that's some sort of arrogance on our part, but we were just very much, this is how we feel about this. This is, the emotion we feel when we listen to this song. This is how important this song, we feel this song is. But it's like, on to the next one. Wow. So I don't know. It's weird. Maybe there's a bit of arrogance on our part.
Oh, no.
But I think it was just, we're just fans saying what we think, and if someone else got this different opinion on it, sees it differently, then that's cool. That's fine. That's still good. That's, if we all thought the same, this would be a hell of a boring world, So yeah, but no, not quite the same way. Sorry, Scott.
Oh no, that's all right. I find that I'm very different from most people in a lot of ways, so it never offends me. One thing that I do have to say that it's similar between Queen and Uriah Heep is the vocal harmonies. I mean, both of these bands are just unbelievable, the way that they put it together. I don't know how a lot of the times Heep structured that, how they designed it for each song. Do you have any insight on how Queen put their vocals together?
Well, the one thing that I found fascinating, and I only found this out, I think, fairly recently, maybe about 10 years ago, which is fairly recent and how long I've been a Queen fan. What they used to do is with their harmonies, they would do the low, the middle, and the high. You know, they would always talk about the 3-part harmonies, but I think it was Brian May that was talking about this. So they would do, so Brian would do the low, the middle, and the high, and Freddie would do the low, the middle, and the high, and then they would do, so you basically had a 9-part harmony in most of their harmonies. So when the harmonies came in, it was always 9 voices you were hearing. So they would do, you'd actually hear, so it wasn't like Freddie took Roger took the high, Freddie took the middle, Brian took the low. They would do each one, you know, and then they would put them all on together. So you got almost a 9. It's a 3-part harmony in terms of obviously, you know, the actual notes, but in terms of the actual thickness of the sound, you had 9 voices on there. Wow. So I found that I just always assumed it was just 3 voices, you know. Well, I'll give or take the odds, you know, little thing to thicken it out, you know. But yeah, I found that amazing. So you're hearing 9 voices most of the time.
That explains the sound and why it sounds so rich and full.
Yeah.
What would they do live then?
So live, it was very much, I mean, very different live. I mean, they were a much rawer band live. There was less, I guess, less grandiosity. You know, and Queen albums, they are very, not every album, but, you know, certainly a lot of the 70s albums were big and overblown and, overproduced at times, I have to say. But live, they were very much just a rock and roll band, you know. That was it. And then when they got to the harmony parts, you know, you maybe get Brian and Roger just doing their thing, you know, just backing up Freddie. But there was never an emphasis on, let's get these harmonies absolutely bang on. It was a bit more of a bit more vibey, you know, rather than actually, let's get these big, thick harmonies going on. So, and I don't know, I mean, if they were still playing live today with Freddie, for example, I don't know what they would do if they would maybe, let's get a few tapes going on in the background just to thicken this up a little bit. I really don't know. Who knows? You know, because I think that's getting a bit more accepted these days in live shows. Yeah, we know it's recorded backing vocals, but it's okay because I'm still singing live and the lead vocal and all that. So I think people are a bit more okay, right? I know what's going on, but I'm okay with it as long as the band is fundamentally playing live here, you know. So, but as a live band, you know, they were, if you watch Queen live in Montreal in 1981. You just look at 4 guys on stage in a lighting rig. That's it. There's no, you know, as much as people talk about Queen being pompous and over the top and all this, it's just 4 guys on a stage rocking out, you know. And the harmonies kind of took a back seat. It was more just, let's just back up Freddie, thicken up his vocals when he needs it. And so less emphasis on the harmonies. So yeah.
Well, that's good though, because you get a variety. So you've got the studio version of the band, and then you have a completely different version of the same band when you're live, and it gives you something different to enjoy instead of just replicating what you did in the studio, which can get, you know, a little stale after a while.
Absolutely, and I think Freddie had said that. He said, if you want to hear the song just as it's on the album, just listen to the album. Right. He would say that. He would say that if you come to a Queen live show, you're going to hear us live doing this song, and it's going to take a different dynamic.
Yeah, I've seen bands live. Cool, you know? Yeah, I've seen bands live, and I've heard them sound exactly like the album, and thought I could have stayed home for this. There's literally no reason for me to have paid $75 to go see this.
Indeed, I think, you know, I'm a big Alice in Chains fan, you know, and I think they were one of those bands that everything was, you know, you won't see them live, you know, because they're big on harmonies as well, actually, you know, Jerry Cantrell along with Lane Staley would be at the time, and you know the new guy they've got as well, and you know everything is pretty perfect, and it's impressive in one way, but in another way it's kind of just give me something just a wee bit different here, just there's something that's gonna give me a bit of vibe here, you know.
Yeah, live music should be alive. It should be in the moment and feeling, you know. It should be a little more up tempo from the album. I remember when I went and saw Monsters of Rock, the one with it was Metallica, Van Halen, Dokken, Kingdom Come, and the Scorpions. So you've got a couple of good seasoned veterans on that stage. Absolutely. And Kingdom Come was a pretty new band at the time. Yeah. I swear to God, I could be wrong, but I swear to God they were playing the CD and really? Just playing along to it. It sounded that exact. And I thought, I was just so sad by that. You know, I was really excited to see them. I loved their first album and couldn't wait to see how they were.
Do you like it and stuff? Yeah.
And just tanked it for me right there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you expect that if you're watching a show like Solid Gold, if you remember Solid Gold in the 80s, and they would walk out with guitars that weren't even plugged into anything, and there were no wireless systems back then. Like, you expect it on something like that. But when you go to see a band live, especially when you're playing with some giants in the industry, you got to bring it. You got to show up for that.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing. There's some bands you watch that are, maybe you should have played the CD, you see it and go, oh, you cannot do these songs live,
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, 100%, just, vibe out, and just, yeah. I totally agree.
Well, speaking of live, you were talking before the show. One of the things that you think about when you think about Uriah Heep is just Mick Box's smile. And I was saying, going to see him live, like, it is there from start to finish. It does not go away the whole time. I mean, he might diminish it when he's focusing on a solo for a second, but apart from that, the guy just loves being on stage. And I love that about him. And then I look at a guy like Brian May, and I think, what a musician. I love his sound. I love the feel of his playing. He really brings something out in music that I think is very unique to him, but is very pleasing to me. I think he's a great guitar player.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, I think Brian was voted, I think it was last year, and I don't know if it was Guitar World. It's one of the guitar magazines anyway, of being the number one guitarist of all time. And I think probably for most people that would go, oh, well, wait a minute, who voted for this? And I get that on some level. I do actually understand that, and I genuinely do. But from my point of view, I get why he was voted number one. The reason I get that, well, I'm a Queen fan, obviously, but the reason I get it is because the man was bringing out all this, these some, especially in the 70s, some of these really vicious riffs. But he would sit there and he would play them live, and he'd play them like he was just a musician. It's similar to Tony Iommi when he plays these big face melting riffs. He's just standing there like, if I was writing these riffs, I would be throwing shapes, I would be grimacing, I would have my feet on the monitor, and right. It's like, I'm like, I wrote this, like, you will hear this, But Brian is very much, this is just music to me, and that was always about, it always served the song, certainly in the 70s, the 80s, things get a little bit different, but he'd serve the song, and even in his playing was all thought out. He often says he writes in his head first. He writes something, he gets an idea and he works it through in his head, then he transfers it to the fingers. The reason he said that is because if you pick up your guitar, your fingers tend to be predictable. They'll go in the same places that
like muscle memory kind of thing.
Exactly. Oh yeah, I'll go to this scale. I'll maybe get my wee lead on that. This here, this mode or whatever, or this riff. I always tend to start on an E or an A or whatever. So he tends to write in his head first and then transfer it to guitar, which is interesting. And I think because Brian is such a complex guy in terms of his own personal life, I think there's been depression there and things like that. So I think that comes out in a lot of his playing as well, which makes it a really heartfelt. So he's not a shredder. He never has been a shredder, or, his lead playing's always been very musical. And I think that's the reason why I understand why he's number one. Now, in other reasons I don't understand why he's number one, because there's, again, it's guitar players and musicians being the number one. It's almost pointless doing it, to be honest. Who's number one this, who's number one that, because it's all down to how music makes you feel a certain way. So, you've got Eddie Van Halen, fantastic player, absolutely fantastic player. I love his playing, but I prefer Brian May. But I get about Eddie Van Halen in terms of shredding, Brian May comes nowhere close. And I get it, but I feel more when I listen to Brian May's playing. So, but there'll be somebody else that looks like, I live for Eddie Van Halen's playing. I love that. I love that shredding sound. I love the fret tap, and I love the virtuosity that just lights up my day. So there's this number one thing, and like I say, it is kind of pointless. But
I totally get that. I love Brian's sound. I love his clean sound. I love his distortion sound. In fact, if you listen to, I don't know if you're familiar with the song Bohemian Rhapsody, but it's a Queen song. And
not heard that one, actually.
When the guitar kicks in, when everybody starts their headbanging part, that tone that he has right there, I absolutely love that sound. That is about the perfect level of distortion, bottom end, high end EQ for me, for a guitar player.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's even to this day, this is what are we, 46 years later or something like that. And it still sounds ferocious to this day, that bit when it comes in, you know, it's like, you know, and you're right, the way it's been EQ'd, the way the sound of it, the tone, everything, it's been dialed in perfectly. And it really just lifts that section of the song, and coming out of the, you know, the operatic section, it's perfect. And I think, yeah, Brian's tone in the 70s was absolutely great, you know, and even the open chord on "We Will Rock You," when it gets into the bit before the solo, that just you know, just it opens up. That's just, you know, just that one. It's just a chord, you know. And I can't remember what chord it is. It was an A. I can't remember, but yeah, it's just, you know, that's all it is. But it just sounds great. It's in the right place. It's you know, it's you know, he's very economical in his playing, Brian, as well, which is great, you know. So yeah.
I don't know if people really that aren't musicians really think about everything that it takes to come together to make a great song and a great album. I mean, everyone's individual tones, those tones working with each other's tones.
Yes.
Then you've got their history as people, which is going to cause them to write a certain way. That has to jive with everybody. Then you have to have a good engineer to mix it all together. You have to have a strong producer to go, you did that chorus already, let's do something different. You know, it takes so many elements to make something good. And then when you have bands that consistently do it over and over, that's when they become like a real treasure. And I look at bands like Uriah Heep and Queen, both being bands that have done that. But then you get something that kind of throws me off, because I'll see something like Led Zeppelin being listed as the best heavy metal band of all time. I don't think of Zeppelin as a heavy metal band. They had a couple of heavy songs, but when I think Zeppelin, I think Jimmy Page with an acoustic guitar.
Yeah. I'm the same. I mean, Zeppelin are one of these bands for me that I do like stuff, you know, and you know that, you know, but I've never committed to them, and I certainly don't see them as a metal band. Yeah, a heavy blues band, absolutely. Certainly when they started, heavy blues band, and I know they went off to different styles. You know, there was even some reggae in there at times and various things. But yeah, I'm the same. I don't look at Jimmy Page and think, yeah, total heavy metal guitarist, or, you know, heavy metal hero. Yeah, I look at Tony Iommi and I think that. I don't think that of Jimmy Page, you know. So it's
Yeah, and you mentioned too, like when guys like Tony Iommi are just playing solos like it's nothing. You know, they're just standing there. I've always thought of bass players in general as people, they're playing their song, but they're thinking about what kind of sandwich they want to make after the show's over, because they're usually fairly expressionless people. They just kind of stand there and do their thing. I love seeing an active bass player, you know, somebody who's really into it, and the bass playing in Heap has been a focus point of their music, because they're not guys that typically just play the root notes along with the song. I mean, they're very adventurous bass playing. I really like that, because it gives a different dimension to the music. It's something that becomes very special for what they do. And Queen has certainly had their signatures on their music as well. Do you think it's something that they kind of strategized and said, this is who we want to be? Or do you think that their style just came naturally to just how they played together?
I think it just came together. I think they had a vision, you know. I think first and foremost, well, you know, when you listen to Freddie talking in the early days, he just wanted to be a star. That was, you know, that was clear from the start. You know, he wants to be a star. But, you know, and if someone said that today in 2021, you're thinking, well, you're very vapid. You know, you know, that's almost an awful thing to say if you're a musician. But I think Freddie wanted to be famous, wanted to be a star, but he had the chops to back it up. It wasn't, I want to be a star, but I have no talent, so I'm just going to cheat my way to the top. I think he knew he had something, and you know, he had skills to back it up. And I think the four members, I think because they're so very different from each other, I think that's again what makes me think that it would almost be impossible from the start for them to figure out what the hell they were going to sound like eventually. You know, it's not like they were four heavy rockers, right? We know we're going to be a heavy rock band for from now to the end. You know, you had John Deacon, who was into Motown and things like that, soul music. You know, you had Roger, who was, you know, a big Bowie fan, and Freddie was a big Hendrix fan, but he loved Liza Minnelli and things like that. And, you know, and Brian was into, you know, Rory Gallagher and people like that, you know, and you know, the Blues and Cream and all these kind of bands. And so, there was things going off there, and Roger was always very much tuned into the teenage angst type of things. So that was the things he would write. Freddie would write these grandiose things, and in the early days, it was very much fanciful, and it was very cloaked. I think a lot of it was about the fact that he was struggling with being straight or gay. So I think some of that was kind of in his lyrics, and he was kind of still struggling with that a little bit. So, but just in a long-winded way of trying to answer your question, I don't think there was necessarily a complete plan of this is what we're going to do. I think it was get famous and be big stars.
Wow.
And we'll just keep writing music, and hopefully that'll happen. I don't think there was any agenda necessarily, with them,
I think too, one other thing I want to bring up before we start the song is it's really impressive to me when you have a band like Queen who does hit it big, and then they suddenly have to deal with the pressures of doing their job under that spotlight, which is completely different than what it was before. And I always think of bands like Guns N' Roses who had been playing those songs for years before Appetite for Destruction was finally released into public forum. Then the record company comes and says, okay, you guys have a month to do that again. Well, it took us years to perfect these songs. Like that didn't happen. Yeah. Well, you got a month, and and it better be good. It becomes a whole different thing when you hit that level of fame. And I think that Queen was one of those bands that really handled that pressure very well because their output was very good after that pressure hit.
Yeah, it was. I think they were quite fortuitous in some ways, actually, Queen, because from that point of view, because the first album came out in 1973, July 1973, and it was already recorded and in the can in July 1972. So they had a full year for it being in the can to actually coming out because they were trying to find a record deal and distribution and all the rest of it. And by the time the first album came out, they'd already started recording the second album. So they kind of almost had a little bit of breathing space, to make that big second album. But you're right, after that first album hits you, shit, we need to get this material together for this second album. Yeah, the record company said they want it in a month, and the pressure's on. We want the next album. We want it now. But I think they were a little bit lucky, but they were very productive because they released 2 albums in 1 year, and I know Heep are like that as well. albums just coming out and out, just like so yeah.
Yeah, and there's a big difference too, being just writing because you want to write and writing because you're told to. You want to write, but you write on your schedule, on your time, when you feel like picking up the guitar, or when the mood strikes you. Versus, no, you have 30 days to write me a basic tracks for an album, and then I'll tell you what you're going to use and what you're not. And also having that producer coming in and telling you how your song is going to work is also another dynamic that people don't typically get used to until they reach a certain level because they don't have a producer up to that point.
And they'll be subservient to a degree, I think, because they're, we'll listen to the producer because we don't know. We're just a new band. We'll just listen to what the producer says, and as they get more confidence and more success, they'll be able to say, actually, no, this is the way I want it, and you're not going to create a hit single out of this. This is art, something pretentious about it turns out that way, So
and Freddie's just like, I don't care, make me a star. What do I need to do?
Yeah, exactly. If it's pretentious, if it's a hit, whatever, it doesn't matter.
As long as I'm on the radio, people are talking about me, then I'm happy. Yeah,
indeed.
Yeah. So you're a fairly new fan of Uriah Heep.
Yes.
How has your experience been with them since you've really started getting into them?
Well, the first thing, we were talking offline, of course, Scott, and the reason I know more about Heep is because of this podcast, and obviously being part of the Deep Dive Podcast Network, and Ry is just fantastic. Ry is the total energy of this thing. He just doesn't give up, and that's what's brilliant about him. And so there's more podcasts coming into the network, which is absolutely brilliant, and looking forward to exploring all these new ones that are coming in. And so when when the Heep one popped in there, I was like, I'll need to address this lack of Heep knowledge and start listening. And when I did that, I was I was very surprised. I don't know why I was surprised, but this is great music. Listen, Look at Yourself album. I think that was the first one I just went to. I think I picked maybe something random from the. Right, I'll just pick a random pod. So I didn't start from the very start, and it was Look at Yourself that I eventually the songs from that album that I was listening to, and you're playing clips of them as well. And I'm like, this sounds, so eventually you go to Spotify, you start listening to the album, like, yeah. And I'm searching for the vinyl on eBay and all that stuff. Like, I need to get these albums, But I'm kind of, it's just the same with music and everything in life. So I've got to a certain point with Heep, and I've not went any further, but that's not because I don't want to. That's just because of, just life getting in the way. So I need to address that. And when we talked about doing this pod, I sort of jumped ahead to Innocent Victim, because that was, I've got a few albums prior to that I need to check out. And I gave that a listen to on Spotify, and that's why this song jumped out, because, being a metal fan and hearing that kind of noisy riff at the start, I'm like, yeah, I'll have some of that, So yeah. So but yeah, I mean, it's been brilliant, because I feel, it's pretty shameful that I hadn't actually known about Heep the way I should have. Like I say, Mick Box, his big smile is what I think of when I think of Heep. I think of S11, and that's probably it before your pod. So thank you.
Oh, good.
because you've introduced me to Heep, and I've got, and I know they've got like 47 million albums, so there's got to be. So I'll be probably listening to them to the day I die, in terms of like going through all the albums.
That's how long I'll be doing the show. They've got 24 out now, and they're working on their 25th. I don't know what the in England what the COVID situation is over there at the moment. I think they're probably starting to open up a little bit like we are here, because they did a more serious lockdown than we did here in America. Where we're just kind of like, just stay home, but don't,
Well, we're kind of same, obviously, like being in Scotland, even because, I know, it's the UK, but Scotland's even get different rules from England in terms of, excuse me, I might just pushed off a mic there.
The whole desk is falling over.
So, Scotland was even more cautious than England, actually, in certain places, we've opened things up a little bit later than England and stuff. So, yeah, but it's all starting to ease up a little bit now. So maybe that Heep album will be back on track. And
that would be nice. And will you see them when if and when they come to Scotland?
Yeah, absolutely. Now I will, because, before I'd have thought, Heep are playing. Okay. And it would have passed me by. But if they come to Scotland, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. I'll go and see them.
Well, having seen them a couple times, I can say they are just a stunning live band. And that is not my bias, because I do the show. I really didn't know what to expect. And the first time I saw them, I was just blown away at how great they sounded. The energy they put into the show is just untouchable.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to, so if they tour on the back of this, I'm assuming that'll be next year. Absolutely, I'll be there.
Now, what if that's the day that the Loch Ness Monster finally makes its appearance, just comes right out of the loch and walks up onto land and says, "Yeah, I'm real."
Yeah, well, we all know he's, he or she is real, so it's fine. It won't be unexpected, So,
do you live anywhere near the actual? Well, the loch is huge, though. It really is.
It's a very deep loch, It's but no, I don't. I am probably about 200 miles away from Loch Ness.
Oh, wow! Okay.
So
that's a little ways.
So we're kind of central, what we call the central belt of Scotland, which is where all the main. If you go across the way, you've got Glasgow and Edinburgh and Stirling and these kind of places, and then north of that you get into the Highlands, and but Loch Ness is kind of a bit further north than where I am. So I'm in Glasgow, so I'm just outside Glasgow now. But yeah, so.
Yeah, well, I can say I've never been there, but I can say there is a lot of beautiful countryside in Scotland. It just from the photos I see, which are obviously geared towards giving a certain impression. I have that impression. It's just really beautiful hills, and I'm sure you have your cities just like everywhere else, but lots of beautiful open land out there as well.
Yes, it's we are exceptionally lucky, in any country out there, and that's got this sort of landscape, that they must feel very lucky too, because I can drive, within half an hour drive, I'm almost in the middle of nowhere, and fairly quickly. And that's just fantastic. And, I love hill walking. I love hill running. So, there's hills that we call Munros, and they are the highest mountains in Scotland. And, Ben Nevis is the highest mountain in the UK. And, so I think there's 270 odd of them. So it's, I'll never ever do all them in my lifetime, but I want to make it at least a serious dent and getting all of them kind of climbs, so yeah.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, please consider going over to Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast outlet, leaving a rating or a review. Be sure to subscribe to make sure that you are notified when new episodes are available. Please be sure to share this podcast with your fellow Uriah Heep enthusiasts and anyone who you think would like Uriah Heep, which should be everyone. And if you are so inclined, please feel free to contribute to the Patreon account. And if you are not a Patreon subscriber, you can also pay through the PayPal link on the website listed in the show links below. I would also like to thank Uriah Heep for their very generous support of the show, and thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Happy days!